Hi, here I am again with another podcast episode, this time about holidays in the 1950s. Now, I know that's a long time ago. I was a child, I'm talking about holidays early 60s really, late 50s, early 60s. The first holiday I really remember was a caravan in Wales. There were four of us kids and mum and dad, and we left at 4 o'clock in the morning. I remember an alarm was set, but of course I was wide awake way before then. We all were. I think I must have been about 12. So we all piled into the car and we pushed it down the drive so as not to wake the neighbours, because cars in those days weren't particularly quiet. So we pushed it down the drive into the road where the dad started the car, and off we went on the drive to Wales. Now these days, going to anywhere, there are motorways, there are fast roads, but of course back then in the 50s there was no motorway. It really was quite a long journey. Even the A roads, well, they weren't that good. They were country lanes, some of them. So we set off at 4 in the morning, and of course bear in mind also that the cars then, you couldn't whiz along at sort of 70 or 80 miles an hour. A lot of them just wouldn't do that sort of speed. If they did, they were shaking and rattling, all quite dangerous, and the acceleration just wasn't there either. So all that added to the journey time, obviously. I think the car we had at the time was a fairly old clapped out Vauxhall. I can't remember the model, but it was a Vauxhall. So what we did, we borrowed a family friend's, borrowed his car, and that was a Hillman Minx. A nice, really nice Hillman Minx. Column change, remember that? Column change gears on the steering column. Bench seats. It was a lovely car, and I remember he put in sort of little plastic waste bins, hooked them on the back of the front seats, and that was for our sweet papers, because he didn't have kids, and I don't think he was too keen on the idea of having 4 children in his car, all eating sweets and dropping papers everywhere. So we kept it clean. We used the little bins that he'd put in there. Eventually we arrived. I don't know what time. It was certainly daylight. It was summer, obviously, so the mornings were quite light. We arrived, and there was this caravan in this sort of field. Of course, it was all great fun for us kids. We unloaded the car, and mum and dad lugged in suitcases and food and stuff like that. We ran around in the field. There was a river or a stream or whatever it was right by our caravan. And I remember Dad saying, don't fall in there. Whatever you do, it's dangerous. Don't fall in the river. And within, I think, an hour of us being there, he'd fallen in. Of course, that was a great laugh. After telling us how dangerous it was and don't go anywhere near the river, it's fast flowing, it's deep, he fell in. I mean, that's how things were in those days. There was no fence or anything. There's just this deep, fast running river with undercurrents and all sorts swirling about. I mean, the water was crystal clear. I remember looking and thinking how deep it was. You could see the bottom, but it was very deep. So anyway, Dad fell in and hauled himself out. That was quite a laugh. We lit a fire outside. You could do that in the caravan park. They didn't mind that. We lit a fire, and that was for warming up things, like a kettle. There was a sort of tripod thing, like you see on the old cowboy films, tripod thing over this fire, which was good fun. Inside the caravan itself, there was a sort of cooker. Sort of cooker. No toilet, of course. Now, this year, only a few months ago, I spent a week in a caravan with our grandson. We took him there to the Isle of Wight. There's a shower, there's a toilet, all mod cons, there's a gas fire, there's a gas boiler, hot water, fully fitted kitchen. It was centrally heated. It's like a house, but it was in fact a caravan. Whereas caravans back in the 50s, there was nothing, no mod cons at all. There was a basic sink. There was no toilet, no shower, nothing like that. The beds were they were like the sofa. You pull out the sofa and it turns into a bed. Great fun for kids though. No television. The caravan on the Isle of Wight, obviously, there's a TV, there's a DVD player, all this sort of thing. But the one in Wales back in the 50s, there was nothing. We took our own radio and plugged that in. It was a mains radio. There weren't there were transistor radios coming in the late 50s, but we took our own mains radio. And what we didn't realise was there was no mains in the caravan. There was gas lighting. Can you imagine that? These little gas mantle things. So they obviously had the cooker was gas, but these gas mantle things, there was no electricity. So the radio was redundant. None of us realised that there wasn't any electricity in the caravan. But as I say, it was just great fun, just being in a caravan in a field. And as dusk came, we could hear, I don't know where it was in Wales, it was deep in the countryside somewhere, but we could hear animals and that in the woods. And of course it's all exciting, and we're wondering whether there are ghosts out there and monsters. It was just, fantastic place to be. And of course, we all eventually went to bed. Well, on the sort of pulled out seat things, we made our beds and we got in there. And of course, we were all looking forward to the morning, the first proper day of our holiday. We were all up at the crack of dawn, of course, and Mum was cooking breakfast. Dad was outside playing around with this fire, trying to light that. And of course, after breakfast, then we went to explore. We had to explore the place. Oh, before we did our exploring, we had to go to the shower block where there were showers and toilets. And even though it's many, many decades ago now, I must have been about 12, I do remember it was disgusting. The toilets were all right, I suppose, but, I don't know. And of course, there were a lot of other people there. There were people in the showers, and I just didn't like the whole thing. I probably did wash, I can't remember, but knowing me, I got away with a week of no washing at all. No, actually, I do remember washing and doing my teeth and things, coming back from the toilet block. We woke up early so we could get there before anyone else. Then we went exploring in the woods, followed the river downstream to see where that went. It was totally different than it is these days, obviously. No mobile phone, no iPad, well, no internet. I mean, had we had mobile phones and iPads, there wouldn't have been any internet there anyway. I suppose they would, because they would have had electricity, but it was just, I don't know, it was so, looking back, it was so primitive, and comparing it with our Isle of Wight holidays that we have every year in a caravan, it's just completely different, chalk and cheese. Of course, back in the 1950s, early 60s, people didn't go abroad. People didn't go up to Gatwick or wherever and jet off to Spain for a week or two. There were holidays abroad, but they were so expensive, and the majority of people just didn't have the money. They couldn't afford to go abroad. So, of course, they ended up at caravan parks, bed and breakfast, which was quite popular, especially places like Blackpool, seaside resorts. There was bed and breakfast, boarding houses. Another thing, there was Butlins. I spent a day at Butlins in Bognor down here on the south coast. I remember that. I must have been, I don't know, about 10, 11. And we spent the day at Butlins. Now, that was interesting. I don't think I would have liked to have spent a week there, because once you've been round the rides and done this and done that, I don't know, I just look back and I think, well, there wasn't much else for kids to do. Of course, there was all sorts going on. I remember going in the rowing boat on the lake. I remember going on the sort of train thing around the site. There was swimming. There was all sorts to do, but I suppose, again, I'm sort of comparing it with today's holidays. Butlins these days, we have taken the grandchildren there, and again, it's totally different. What I don't like about it now is all these slot machines everywhere. Wherever you go, there are slot machines over the whole place. And of course, all the kids head for the machines because they love it. Putting in the pennies and the 2p coins, they just love the whole thing. I can't stand the noise. But there we are. But going back to the caravan, every day there was something to do. We'd go out in the car. We didn't stay on the caravan site every day. We'd go out in the car to visit places. Was it the Festiniog Railway? I went on that. I do remember that. I don't think we were far from Festiniog. That was a good day out. I remember that. I don't think we did Snowdon. We went to Betsy Coed. Is that how you pronounce it? Sorry if there's anyone from Wales listening. Betsy Coed. Lovely place. Beautiful waterfalls and countryside there. Absolutely amazing place. In fact, I've been back since, many years ago again. But I think Betsy Coed is probably my favourite place in the whole of Wales. Wherever we went, we didn't go into restaurants or cafes like that. We took a picnic with us. Most people did, because again, they just didn't have the money. We couldn't afford, all 6 of us, to eat out every day. I forget what the evening meal, I think Mum cooked the evening meal in the caravan. We didn't even go out once for a meal anywhere because of the expense, because of the cost. but it was great fun having a picnic. I think it did rain. Well, it normally rains, doesn't it, in Britain? In the UK, you normally get rain. Even in midsummer, it's going to rain at least one day, especially if you've planned a holiday. But that didn't deter us at all. We still enjoyed it all. In fact, I do remember it did rain because I went and stood and looked at the river, the rain lashing down into the river. Obviously, I got soaked, but who cares when you're a kid? So we had breakfast at the caravan. The picnic was lunch out somewhere, wherever we were. We'd settle down, flask of tea, sandwiches and whatever, and then back to the caravan in the evening for the evening meal. I do recall getting fish and chips. I remember we stopped at a fish and chip shop probably once or twice in the week's holiday. I'm pretty sure we did twice because I remember having fish and chips in the caravan, which again was was great fun as kids, having fish and chips out of newspaper. That's the way to eat fish and chips. The good old British way. None of this modern polystyrene rubbish. I remember Dad sitting in the car in the Hillman Minx during the evenings because there was a car radio. So if he wanted to hear the news or anything like that, a radio play, he'd have to go and sit in the car. We played board games. I remember we took Monopoly with us, which went on for hours, of course. No electricity, gas lighting, no toilet, no iPad, no computer, no phone. Absolutely nothing. Can you imagine today saying to your kids, right, we're going on holiday to this caravan in Wales and there's just nothing? Is there internet there? No, there's no electricity, let alone internet. Can you imagine what it would be like for them? They'd hate it. I don't know what they do. I took a book. I remember I took a torch and I took a book about, it was The Boy Electrician. I carried it around wherever I went, The Boy Electrician. And I read that in bed with a torch. As kids did then. I think I took a couple of other books as well, all about electricity and magnetism, because that was my hobby, and later, of course, to become my profession, which was to be a radio and television engineer later in my life. I don't know what other holidays we had. I don't think there were many holidays like that because, again, with the money. I remember I went to, I think it was Wales again, with my sister and our cousins, their family, my mother's sister and her husband and their children. Now that was in a tent. They had this huge tent and I didn't like that. There's no way I like a tent. The caravan, well, looking back, the caravan was bad enough, but a tent, can you imagine that? And it did rain. I remember at night, it must have been in the middle of the night, 2, 3 in the morning, lashing rain on the tent. Of course I couldn't sleep. We cooked breakfast, or the lady did, our auntie, on a camping gas stove. Do you remember GAZ, camping gas? And I remember this thing blew up. I don't know what my uncle did, but he put this sort of screen round it because of the wind. It was just blowing it out. And I think he put it in a metal box or something, and the thing went bang, flames shot out the top, all highly dangerous. Imagine health and safety today, seeing something like that going on. I mean, even the caravan, there was probably carbon monoxide poisoning everywhere from the old cooker. But of course, back in the 50s, I don't think anyone was even aware of carbon monoxide poisoning. But again, it was good fun. I preferred the caravan holiday, but it was good fun in the tent, I suppose. I think that was for 2 weeks, which was a bit too much. Because that's what we did. We moved. We stayed at one place, then we went to another campsite. And of course, you've got the same thing, setting up the tent again. And the toilet and the shower blocks, which were dreadful if I remember correctly. Well, I know I remember correctly. Things like that, sort of vivid memories in my mind. Standing in virtually cold shower in the mornings. It was dreadful. Having said that, in the mornings, make that singular. In one morning, I think I showered, and that was it. I pretend to. I'd go over there with my towel, toothpaste, toothbrush, bar of soap, and I'd sort of wet the head a bit, come back and say, I've had a shower. And of course I hadn't at all. Things were certainly very different in those days. Of course, looking back, we didn't know any different. We didn't know that in the future there would be sort of luxury caravans with television, hot water, shower, toilet, microwave. Well, there were no microwaves then. Fully fitted kitchen. We had nothing to compare it with. That was the way caravans were. There were probably better quality caravans than ours, but that's the way it was back then. For sort of working class people, their holidays in the UK, it was Butlins, or what was the other one, Pontins, was it? Off to Blackpool or Wales, down to the West Country, wherever, up to Scotland. and they were in a caravan or a tent, a lot of them. So we had nothing to compare that with. We didn't know any different. And I must say, it was great fun. When I look back on the holidays, it was great fun. So there we are. I hope you've enjoyed this episode about holidays back in the 50s and early 60s. Look out for the next episode, and I shall see you next time. Bye bye for now.